Have you tried to use the feeling as a secret, but no matter how much you try, nothing changes? And the more effort you put in, you just end up feeling more frustrated? Well, in this video, I'm going to show you why that's been happening and what you can do to change it. In this video, I'm going to show you very easy to understand practical application of what Neville Goddard was talking about when he said the feeling is the secret. The more you understand how and when to utilize this, it's going to make so much more sense, and you're going to be able to utilize the energy that you have towards creating what you actually want. So let's get started. We're going to do our best today. I usually have a light, but the power's out, but it's not going to stop me from making this video for you. In hopes it can help. I'm going to quickly draw out what is the problem, because right now this is you, okay? And this box represents your default feelings. Now, Neville Goddard talked about how your level of consciousness, which is going to essentially create your default set of thoughts and feelings, your general state of being. Dr. Joe Dispenza describes that as your thoughts, feelings, and actions. But this self-concept, your level of consciousness, if your feeling right now is not what you're desiring, well, you might look out into the world and it might be an amount of money. Maybe if you had that $1 million, then you could have those feelings, right? Maybe it's about a romantic relationship. That is the symbol of what you want. But what happens is that people look outside themselves thinking, okay, if I had this, then that is what will change how I feel. But if I don't have this, then I'm actually going to stay in the same feeling. The reason your self-concept matters so much when you're starting out and trying to tap into the feeling is because if you had a new plant and you wanted it to grow, but you had a pre-existing plant already there and you tried to put the new plant on top of this, it's not going to grow because that feeling doesn't have any roots to hold on to. It's being blocked by your old self-concept. Those lower level assumptions or ideas you hold about yourself, it's going to reject the feeling. It's going to be like, that's not true. Don't you know who I am? Don't you know I'm not deserving? I can't have that money. That feeling associated, I'm going to kick it out. Or maybe it's going to bring something up or have all these intrusive thoughts. So you understanding that the work is not to try to get the feeling harder. It's actually more about going to what's blocking your ability and what's in the way of you feeling and starting to curate and cultivate that new feeling so that you can start bringing it into your life. So when you have this approach, which is what I did for most of my life, I felt that if I could get that person to text me, I'd had so many different relationships where I desperately sought their validation because I didn't feel very good about myself. I had a low self-worth. But I felt if I could get their attention, if they wanted to commit to me, if they would do something nice for me, then that would change the way I felt. And what was happening there, we're going to talk about a little bit later, but I totally resonate with that. But what you're saying is that your circumstances define how you're feeling. And since you don't have them, you can't change. But the biggest key to understand here is that the feeling that you're in, that level of consciousness, is what is actually defining your circumstances. You're not defined by your circumstances, you define your circumstances. If you can just start to get this in your head, and I'm going to share more about how this is happening and why this is happening, but more importantly, what you can start doing today to start breaking out of this, but just start to understand that the reason that you're feeling is in your self-concept is because your self-concept is what is creating your circumstances, and that desired wish, that desired feeling will not come from the outside. And this is where so many people get messed up and they waste so much energy, is because they keep seeking the mirror to change rather than going to what is being reflected. So now let me show you why this is the case and how you can change it. The reason why your self-concept is so vital before you can even start tapping into the feeling is because it not only is going to attract, right? So this up here is going to represent your consciousness level, your image of yourself, the concept, the idea you hold to be true. Now, the reason I use quotation marks is because it's not universally true. It is based on past experiences that happened to you where you were either treated this way, you saw people going through the world this way, you think this is how the world works or how you're supposed to be treated. And you've given it permission or consent, again, based on very real and valid experiences, but a lot of the meanings and the stories as to how they attach to you, where they ultimately got stored, they were taken from a brain that wasn't fully developed, from a mind that hadn't really formed. So they've stayed imprinted there because it feels comfortable and it's how you see yourself. Now, because it's how you see yourself, and also probably too how people treated you, you didn't just come up with this because you don't like yourself. You love yourself, or you would not be watching this video to try to help yourself. Okay, I want you to realize you searching out information to change your life is a massive act of self-love and self-consideration. The more you start to put more energy into that, the more you'll start to be able to get more clues of what you need to break free. So in this right here, this is going to be your filtration system. Okay, so energetically also too, Dr. Joe Dispenza says we send out an electromagnetic energy into the universe. The electrical part is our thoughts. The magnetic part that's actually much stronger is our feelings. That's what's going to be up here, okay? So with that, if you've gone through a lot of rejection, if you had an adult caretaker who neglected you, maybe they were too busy, maybe they were abusive, right? You have a view of how you relate to getting your needs met when it comes to love. So one part of why our self-concept and why we have to change it and why your circumstances don't matter right now, because you can change them, is because we will attract the old dynamics. We will attract the people who are too distant, who we have to prove and earn. I did that over and over and over in romantic relationships. I found people who were wishy-washy, who weren't really interested, or who had so much other stuff going on, I was trying to be their hero. Another thing too, it could be about money, that growing up you never quite had enough, or maybe you were told you had to earn everything, you didn't deserve anything as you were, or maybe you just had actually a lot of lack, whether it be emotional connection or actual physical money. So we actually will attract those dynamics, even though we know right now, based on quantum physics, that every possible reality exists right now in wave potential. Just like you think of all the radio station potential waves going around us, but the only way we can tap into it is if we had a radio to tune in. And when we tune that radio into a distinct wave, we collapse that, we can tune into that frequency, that channel. Just the same is with our energy, that version of us, collapsing that potential wave into particle form so we can experience it in our life. How do we do that? It's through attention. But what happens is people get their attention on the old dynamic. Then they try to act that way. They might get triggered, right? And then you feel powerless, hopeless, helpless, or stuck. And then you react, right, from the old. And guess what it does? It creates more of the old, which is what you don't want and what you don't deserve. So the first part of why you're feeling, why the basis of that new feeling is in your self-concept, is learning, okay, you might attract the old dynamic, okay? That's all right. That doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It's how you respond to that old dynamic. Now, the second part that I think is absolutely wild about how this works is our perceptions. So even though right now these exist, that romantic relationship or the money or the career, whatever it is you're wanting, that you're wanting to feel that feeling. For one, it's also important to realize that there are attachments you have to this in terms of, if I had that romantic relationship, then I would encourage you to list out the three things. If it's about money, if I had that amount of money, I would then, the end emotion amount of freedom, maybe it's, I don't know what a freedom is, but freedom, maybe it's security. Maybe for a romantic relationship, it's about being seen. Maybe it's about connection. What are the top three things that come to mind? I want you to have those in your mind, write them down in your phone app, pause the video, write them down somewhere, because this is going to be really important. Perceptions are your mind's filters. Your subconscious is processing between 10 to 50 million pieces of information every single second, but all it allows into your conscious mind that you're watching this video with is 40, okay? That's all you get to see, but they're getting processed through the 40 of the past, right? Those little bits are only going to come through this and then into here. So that means even though you might meet somebody, you might know somebody who's emotionally available who might be interested in you, or be 2 connections away from finding opportunities, or just one idea away from really hitting something into whatever you're doing with your career. Our perceptions, our perceptional bias, I've had one all my life. I've had a perceptional bias of abandonment. Even though so much I wanted to connect and have a romantic relationship and build a family with somebody, I had a perceptional bias that people would only abandon me. So what did I find over and over again? People who could not give me what I needed because that filtration, that bias was still finding it. Then I would replay my past. Okay, I've got to be really good. I've got to work really, really hard in order to get it. So it wasn't until I started understanding this that, oh, I could perceptionally be blocking things out. When I started feeling powerless, helpless, hopeless, or stuck, I started to learn, okay, I knew that I was in my own old feeling, and even just recognizing it, okay, I know this isn't true. And the more I step out of it, the more I realize that I am now creating space for the feeling I actually want to feel. So let me now get into what you can do next. So as you can start to see, the feeling Neville Goddard is talking about is not thinking about having a lot of money and being like, oh man, that would be so great. Because for one, you're thinking of it. And 2, if you go out throughout your day and you're stressed and you're worrying about money and you feel very limited and your whole body is tense, well, that's not tapping into the feeling. That is thinking of the feeling and yearning for the feeling, which is a good starting point, but that alone is not going to get you anywhere. That's maybe why you feel so frustrated, and you're not wrong or bad for not knowing this. You're learning. And again, you watching this now is self-love. So the first thing, like I mentioned earlier, little foreshadowing, you want to know, what attachment do I have? If I had this romantic relationship, what is my experience? Because you're going to take all that attention now back to you. You're going to start doing introspection, starting to understand yourself at a deeper and more meaningful level. Maybe it's about freedom. Maybe it's about stability. Maybe it's about connection. There is going to be an assumed need that it's going to meet if you have it. Okay, so that's the first part. What is the actual feeling you'll get? Not feeling of it. The second thing you're going to do is, where do I have that, right? So for me, one big thing is satisfaction, right? When I was still competitive and training and doing, world-class athletics, I had an immense satisfaction when everything would line up. Even though 98% of the time in my training, in my meets, it was a lot of setbacks or failures. I didn't quite get it, but the times I did, it was so satisfying. And in many ways, the fact it was so challenging made it more satisfying when I could get it. So yes, that was a large scale representative of it, making a world championship team, representing the United States. But on a very low scale, when I create things with my hands, sometimes when I'm vacuuming the floor, there were low levels of satisfaction. When I started to understand, I started to put energy and attention of what I was actually getting. And it helped me to close the gap that I was so separate from having that experience. Yes, it was a lower level, but it helped me to start breaking through the idea that I was separate. I actually had it, and if I have it now, I just want more of it. That feels a lot more hopeful, and some momentum can gain, as opposed to, I don't have access to it at all, but if that thing outside there happened and changed, then I could have it. Anytime what you want is solely dependent on somebody else or something else, and you feel powerless, stuck, hopeless, or helpless, that is a big warning flag, a big because what you're saying is that you feel like the childhood dynamic, because what would happen then? You could only get what you wanted or needed if that environment changed, and you had no hope to give any sort of influence of getting what you need met or advocating for yourself unless it changed. So if you find yourself in that, simply start minding the gap. Okay, the story I want to tell myself is I'm helpless here. What do I need? I need some comfort. Maybe I need some encouragement. Maybe I can call my friend. Maybe I can write a letter to myself when I'm not triggered that I can read to remind myself to help pull me out of that and remind me of who I am. What you're doing there is being the adult you actually needed to yourself in that low moment. Now, getting triggered and feeling those powerless feelings, that's what keeps you stuck in that lower level consciousness, in those lower level feelings, and ultimately your dominant feeling is not ever going to be what you're wanting. So another thing you can do to dissolve when you feel you get pulled back. This is going to be two parts. So when I'm talking about you get triggered or you're feeling powerless, hopeless, helpless, or stuck. Okay, starting to lose myself here. I'm feeling powerless. Okay, what do I need? Again, what I would write down also too, 3 things that you wanted or needed from your adult caretaker. Maybe it was being seen. Maybe it was to be understood. Maybe it was support. Maybe it was consistency. Whatever it is, write down the top 3. That is who you will need to be to your inner child. Your inner child could also be explained as your subconscious beliefs, your limiting beliefs, right? They were formed at the same time. They are the same thing. And that is not my idea. That it comes from Bethany Webster. Amazing work she does with the mother wound specifically, which I highly recommend. Everyone goes and looks her up. So as you're starting to get clear on what the feeling actually is, understanding that it's an inside out experience, starting to understand you do have some supply already, and then starting to step out when you get pulled back. Nope. I'm going to be aware of the old story. I'm going to breathe to help calm myself down. And I'm going to make a new choice, right? Taking care of yourself. What do you need? That's all in part 1 and 2. So the third thing you can do when you're not triggered, when you're not feeling emotionally volatile, when you're not feeling scared, hopeless, or fearful, okay? I want you to start thinking, okay, what is that limiting belief? What is that negative assumption you have of yourself, which is fueling or constructing, right, this low self-concept you have of yourself, and it's blocking the feeling. Your low self-concept of yourself blocks you from feeling the bigger feeling that you're actually deserving of. So as you start getting into that, okay, I don't believe I'm worthy. I don't believe I'm deserving. Start to understand what message, what was told to you, even if it's not a direct moment. If you can start to just get an idea, oh yeah, I felt like when I was a kid, because it could also be implied. It's not directly told to you. So if you had the impression that you had to earn love, you had to work for it, if you weren't an A student or a top tier athlete, you were nobody. I want your adult self, me and you, we're going to go back in time. We're going to see that little precious you. Beautiful, unique, deserving. And I want you to think of that child and getting treated that way, or those expectations, or those opinions. What is your opinion of that situation? That is how you start to dissolve the glue that is holding you back from the feelings that you actually deserve. The more and more you do that in your opinion of you and your deservingness, your worthiness, when it overrides the expectations, opinions, and judgments of people early on in your life, this is when you take copyright ownership of your self-concept. When you do that, you create massive space for that feeling. Until then, you're just going to keep blocking up against a wall, and it's going to lead to more and more frustration and more disappointment. One of the most powerful things that I did to start shifting my self-concept was to learn to dissolve the old assumptions. And I created what I call reverse visualization. And I created this video right here to help you utilize it and take power and advantage of it. The idea that you aren't worthy, the idea you're not deserving is simply an idea. You can let it go and upgrade. So check that video out right here. Thank you so much for watching. I love y'all, and I'll see you on the next one.